Thank you for joining today, and I'm excited about today's topic because this is actually something that is something that changes that we made in our office that instantly made us a considerable amount of production. Again, this is part of our Bootcamp series for orthodontists. I've said this every time, I am not a practice consultant. There are amazing practice consultants out there that do this day in, day out. I am just an orthodontist who created this software, and of course, along the way, have learned a lot about what other orthodontists are doing and some needs. And so I'm just trying to share it with everybody and hope that we can come out of this stronger than ever. And if you are using our software, everything we're talking about here, it's not just talk, it's something that you can go in and implement in your software tomorrow. So you could go in and start putting these things into place so that when you do reopen your office, it's a very quick way of seeing improvement in your practice. When you use preset financial parameters based on whether or not a patient falls within a certain criteria or not. So, it's not something that we commonly do in orthodontics. I mean, in other industries, they do it all the time. If you think of the banking industry, if you apply for a loan, they're going to profile you based on your history. Are you someone who pays your bills on time? Do you own a house? What is your FICO score, which is also incorporates some of those things. So, and then based on that is what your interest rate is going to be. So other industries do it. If we look at the credit card industry, it maybe isn't so much a grading system, where in loans you might get the premier interest rate, you might get middle of the road interest rate, you may get a poor interest rate. In a lot of times in credit cards, it's a yes or no. If you're a good candidate based on a certain set of criteria, yes, you're approved. If you're not approved. And so in orthodontics, we don't really do that, right? I mean, how most practices, there are some practices that do use certain screening criteria in their financial plans, but most practices, it's a yes or no. Or I'm sorry, we don't use the any set of parameters. We're going to give them a financial plan, and generally everybody gets the same. It doesn't really matter for most part what the patient's history is or what's in their background. We're basically going to give everybody the same payment plan. And I'm not here to say that's right or wrong. I just want to plant the seed on maybe another way of thinking about it, and then some ways that we can actually use this to improve some of our conversion rates. So, what's an example? I mean, there are some people who are proponents of this, and they might say, look, you need to set up your A, B, C, and D patients. And your A patients, you're going to get 0 down, and you might give them an extra 6 months to pay it off. And the thinking here is not only that you're rewarding your A patients, and you feel like that's pretty low default risk. I mean, they're not likely going to, this group may not likely not pay me. They're going to pay their monthly payment plan. But also, maybe they'll attract more A patients. And so, there's that train of thought. And, the B patients, they're a little bit, maybe that's a little bit riskier. And then when you get down to the D, you go, well, these are the patients that, I don't feel very confident they're going to pay me at all. And so I'm going to make it, almost to the point where they probably aren't going to want to come to my practice. And that's okay with me because they weren't going to pay me. So, I'm going to make it 50% down, and they got to pay me in 6 months or whatever it is. And, I think in theory, this is a great idea. If it wasn't, banks wouldn't do it. And, credit institutions wouldn't do it. But I don't know how practical it is for an orthodontic office. I mean, like I said, there are some services out there that do provide this. And I do think there's some merit. But, speaking for myself and a lot of the orthodontists that we work with, there's a sense of uneasiness about giving someone a different plan based on their creditworthiness, and also just from a system standpoint, it's just not the easiest thing to do. Being able to set up all these different payment plans and being able to do it on the fly, sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge. And so what is the challenge, right? It's just like we said, it's being able to build this system in. Banks have, thousands of people that do this. They run this whole division. They're looking at the performance of of who they lent money to see if they should change their A, Bs, and Cs and Ds. And we just aren't built that way. I mean, yeah, we give out a number of payment plans, but we're not really built to really analyze how good a job they're doing, and then also to reflect on, is my A group really performing well? Are they really paying on time? I mean, we just don't have that infrastructure built in. But to a degree, we doesn't mean that just because we can't take it to the same degree as maybe a bank can, that there isn't some merit on the idea of using some sort of conditions to provide payment plans that are more favorable to some groups than the other. And it doesn't all have to be a nail, just because you have this tool of being able to give people different payment options doesn't mean it has to be for everybody. And sometimes you can use it in certain groups and not in others. And that's what I want to show you. So, my experience has been, and I think, talking to many, many orthodontists, and I'm sure maybe a lot of you feel the same way, that, we're just not using credit scores. We don't feel comfortable with that. And, there's a lot that goes into credit scores, and that's something that is sometimes not an easy thing for us as orthodontists and orthodontic practices to wrap our heads around and be able to use this tool appropriately. So, what other conditional events can we use? Is there something else that we can use to set people into a set of parameters that could help us to improve conversion rates, even if it's in just one segment? If you've ever talked to me, or you've talked to, or you've seen any of our other bootcamp series, or ever gone to a meeting and seen me at a booth, I'm a big proponent of, to boost our bottom lines, we have to do things in blocks and segments. Too many times I think as orthodontists, or office managers, we want to improve our conversion rates, we want to increase our production, but it's made up of so many different components, and we're trying to tackle it all at once, and we get lost in the noise. And the question goes, is there a group that we could use some sort of conditional event in their past to give them more favorable terms to get them to convert at a higher level? Now, there is conditional marketing, which I think is the future of marketing. I think it's just the coolest thing, is where you're pre-qualifying patients based on a number of questions that they're answering. And this is something that on Wednesday, we're going to have Keaton Walker from orthopatient.com, and he is going to be on our boot camp, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about conditional marketing and how you can really use that to get high qualified patients into your practice. And so you can do it from a marketing standpoint, but what else can we use? What else do we have in the history of the patient in our practice? And when we were thinking about this in our office, we said, well, what if we just took our phase 2 patients, right? When you think about your phase 2 patients, you have a history with them. We've treated them for potentially years between observing and treatment, and then post phase 1 into phase 2 retention. And, we have this history with them. The phase 2 I used to find was kind of a challenging conversion. You already maybe, I've asked them for a large sum of money for the phase 1, and now it's time to ask them again. And, I found that my conversion rates were relatively low. And so we started thinking about this from a patient profiling standpoint and thought, could we do something different to help this group? So we have a payment history with our phase 2 patients. We have a loyalty, but, there's this sense of double dipping. And so, could we offer them a more favorable term to get our phase 2 patients to convert? That was the question. And so in my practice, I guess it was a couple of years ago, we decided to put into Startaloo this group, a patient profile group, and I'll show you how we did that, to offer phase 2 patients with good history very favorable terms. And I'm going to go back to this. And so, what did that look like? Well, if they had paid all their payments on time, they made all their appointments on time, never gave us a hard time, like they were good patients we wanted in our practice, we gave them a 0 down payment option on their phase 2 and gave them an extra 6 months to pay it off. And now I know the pushback oftentimes is, well, you're going to have a dip in cash flow because you're not getting that down payment. And that's a decision you have to make for your own practice if you're comfortable with it. But by doing that, it gave them a sense of loyalty. When we tell them, look, you've already paid once, and we want to make this very favorable for you to sign up with our office, so we're going to offer you a no down payment. It actually turns this kind of awkward conversation into a really positive thing. They really appreciate it because they're not used to it. most parents, when they come into that phase 2 conference, are worried that they're going to get hammered again with another big down payment. Again, I've got this payment history that shows they're good payers. I'm taking a very low risk. If they go and shop it around, are they going to get that anywhere else? Probably not, because they don't have history with another office. So, you're also building loyalty there. So, for us, this was our thinking. We were like, well, let's see if this actually helps. So once we do it, again, if you know me, anytime I make a change, I want to track the data. I want to make sure that change actually produced what I put into it. So I'll show you, how this worked in my practice and how successful this was. So in the course of the first year that we did this, we increased our phase 2 conversion rate by 16%. Okay, and I'll show you what that means in a dollar amount in just a minute. So we were 16% higher on our phase 2 conversion rates after we made this change. So I think there may be some other factors that go into that, but overwhelmingly this was successful. I mean, and this was one of the fastest segments of my practice. That this was the largest growth that we saw in the different segments of my practice. And we look at different segments of the practice when we're looking at our key metrics. And, this is one that we look at, our phase 2 conversion. And this was the largest one. And, what does that mean from a dollar standpoint? Well, if we run the report card that's in Startaloo, that tells us if we strip out just our phase 2 patients, for every 1% increase in conversion of phase 2 was an extra $9,000. So 16%. At $9,000, about $140,000 increase in production over the course of the year. Very successful. I didn't have to spend any additional marketing dollars. These are patients that were already in my office. Did I take a hit on, collections? As of now, we haven't, because again, these are patients that have proven they were going to pay and they are continuing to follow through. Generally payment behavior, and this is why banks do what they do, payment behavior stays consistent. So if they paid in the past, unless there's some sort of event, odds are they're going to continue to pay you. So how do you do it if you're in Startaloo? Because we want to automate this so that we can track it and it's really easy for the treatment coordinator. We just use the patient profile tab. This is where you create your sets. So you could do this for your A, B, C's, and D's, but in our case, as you can see here, we made a phase 2 with good history. We have a couple other ones too. Not gonna lie, there are some patients that are not great payers, and we have one for them too. But in this case, we made one phase 2 with good history. What did it look like? We made a 0% down payment, and we gave them an extra 6 months. So when that patient is about to get a financial presentation, they are tagged as this phase 2 patient with good history. And then that means that the system, and this is what it would look like in their patient file. And that means in the system, when they get an 18-month estimated treatment time, the program is already going to give them 24 months, and you can see they got a 0 down payment option presented to them. That's not what a new patient is going to get. That's not what another patient profile is going to get. We can create a different set for them. So we are playing with other patient profiles, and we're hoping to continue to expand on this in my practice anyway. And again, very, very successful. Really has worked well. And, even if you're not using Startaloo, you can still start thinking about, using this technique to help your phase 2 patients convert at a higher number. When we're looking at the data, again, if you're using Startaloo, you just strip out that one patient profile. So not only can you check your phase 2 conversion, but you can compare your phase 2 conversion with this patient profile. So you can get very, very specific, and that's going to give you an exact ROI on how this change affected your practice. All right, so that is the patient bootcamp session on profiling. And we have a worksheet that is going to go up on our Facebook page. If you're following along, you like to go through them. Basically just start thinking about how you can use this in your own practice. And do you want to start segmenting your payment plans for different groups of people in your practice? All right, thank you everybody. We're going to be on Wednesday. We're going to keep Mark is going to be here. I'm excited about this. Conditional marketing is the future of marketing. If you're not familiar with how it works, he's the guy. He will be able to walk you through how it works with his Facebook campaigns, and I'm really excited to have him on. All right, I wish everybody well, and see you next time.